is a reminder to all of us. We are privileged to have Dr. Matthew Dan, who is the senior scientist and head at the Plant Genetic Resource Division of the Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute, Palur. I now invite Dr. Ajesh TP from the Department of Botany, Marthoma College, Chungatra, to welcome the gathering and introduce the speaker to us.
Thank you, teacher. Good afternoon, all. This is a great pleasure to invite our dearest Guru, Dr. Matthew Danzar, in this session. And as we know, it was the it is the fourth session conducted by the department in the name of Salvos. It's a webinar series. And today we are discussing about ethnobotany and traditional knowledge. As we know, the aboriginals or indigenous communities are the treasure of knowledge. These local communities are basically wise, eco-friendly, and have self-sufficient and self-reliant, and they can ensure a year-round supply of flora and fauna for their existence. At the same time, the practice reflects their conventional wisdom as it exerts less pressure the available natural resources. The traditional knowledge will be serve as a very valuable document for the planners, policymakers, etc. For the better development scheme can be formulated for socio-economic uplifting of rural inhabitants of the area. In this context, this webinar will be much meaningful. Our today's resource person, Dr. Matthew Dan, is an eminent scholar and a scientist and head of Plant Genetic Resource Division, Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute, Palur, Thiruvananthapuram. He has an experience of 33 years in conservation and characterization of medicinal plants and aromatic plants. He described around 6 species of angiosperms to the science. And he published about 76 research publications in various reputed international and national journals, and he contributed 21 chapters in various books and proceedings. And he authored about 8 books and 4 booklets. Already he completed 9 major projects and 5 are in pipeline. I believe that this webinar will be a thought-provoking and useful to all participants. So I invite our dearest Dr. Matthew Dan sir to this session. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh.
Okay, sir.
Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah, a warm good afternoon to you. It's really
Participants,
a privilege to me also to be with you in this afternoon. And I would like to share some aspects on ethnobotany, especially recently the branch of ethnobotany was included in the syllabus of as well as PG courses in various universities. When I was a student, there was not such a topic. So to me, it's a recently portion in various syllabi. Therefore, I would like to share some aspects regarding this branch, along with experience. And Is it visible? Hello.
സാറേ പ്രസന്റഡ് ആയില്ല, പ്രസന്റേഷൻ ആയില്ല കേട്ടോ സാറേ.
Okay, okay. It's sharing.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, yes.
So I would like to discuss the topic of and traditional knowledge. As you are aware, traditional knowledge is directly linked with tradition and culture of countries of the world. So every country, especially Westerners, are much proud of their traditional knowledge, and especially Eastern countries and India are trying their best to project various aspects of that, which is really an asset to the culture and civilization of every nation. Now, another term related to this traditional knowledge is indigenous knowledge, or IP. It's a traditional knowledge originated and confined to community-based functional system developed and defined by a particular group of people, probably aborigines or tribes, who are dwelling in a particular ecosystem.
Okay.
So this
We request all the participants to kindly stay tuned. There is some network issue. Sir will be back soon and we will restart the lecture very soon. We apologize for the problems caused.
formatting.
Participants, kindly stay tuned. There is some network issue. We will clear it soon and we will begin the session very soon. We apologize for the problems caused. Stay tuned.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Okay, okay, thank you. So, sorry for the inconvenience. Actually, I am in a very remote place in a forest area, so we have severe problem of net connection. I hope we will continue. So welcome back, and once again, sorry for the trouble. Actually, a tribe is a primitive or aboriginal society who have a common ancestor and often a common language or a dialect. And each tribe has their own culture and tradition, and of course, myths and beliefs. So, since they have a particular culture and tradition, definitely each tribe has their own method to use as well as conserve the biological diversity around them. That's leading to the significance of this particular branch. And ethnobotany, as you all know, is the scientific study of the traditional knowledge and customs of a people concerning plants and their medical, religious, and other uses. This is the scenario of the tribes in India, especially based on the last census in 2011. India has over 550 tribal communities coming under 226 linguistic groups. That much languages or dialects they are using. And 8.2% of total Indian population is coming under the tribal group. Mizoram is the state with highest proportion, that is around 94.5% of population are coming under tribal groups. And in Goa is the lowest density of tribes, just 0.04. And coming to the population of different groups, Gonds, the tribe Gonds in Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and Maharashtra, they are spread in these three states. They are coming around 7 million, while the minimum number of individuals are seen in the Great Andamanese tribes. Just 43 individuals are there in that particular group. This scenario indicates a wide range of population pattern in these different 550 tribal groups in India. You can see the map, all the red colored portion shows the intensity of the tribal population. And based on social organization and culture, the Indian tribes can be chiefly classified under 6 different groups, such as the primitive hunter-gatherer group. And the Chola Naikins of Kerala are examples of this particular group. The name itself indicates their occupation and how they are living. They are the most primitive group. And there are primitive agriculturists. The Malambandarans are the examples, and plain agriculturists who are doing some sort of modern agriculture. They are one of the examples is Kurumar. And there are simple artisans who knows carpentry as well as pottery, etc. And Mannan is an example. And there are pasture and cattle breeders. The Mudwan group is an example who will look after the cattle or sheep they have. And certain little more modern type called industrial urban type. And Mavo tribe of Andhra Pradesh is an example for that. These are the significance of ethnobotanical knowledge. Actually, the ethnobotany provide information on wild plant resources for food, medicine, fiber, etc. And knowledge on the genetic diversity of crop plants. That's very, very important. The knowledge on such diversity, especially with related to the healthy stocks, strains, and desirable cultivars, are very important with considering the food scarcity of every region. The knowledge on traditional skills and art craft are also significant because they can directly involve in the lifestyle and livelihood of the society. Information on distribution status of plants as well as animals. And through this information, we can assess the threat value and various conservation strategies. I will show you some examples. And information on availability and process of minerals and metals is also an added point in the significance of ethnobotanical informations. And also they have several myths, totems, taboos, etc. To pertain to each tribal group, especially related to health management and various conservation practices. This is architectural aspects of skill of certain tribes. So the term used is ethno-engineering skill to make tree huts and all. And nowadays it is very much useful in tourism development and all. And the tribe Kurumur are experts in such skills. See, this is the front yard of their house. See how neatly they are constructed, simply with the available resources like grass, mud, cow dung, etc. So the construction of their house itself is uh, very significant with respect to using the natural resources. See the festival of Kani tribe, which is quite eco-friendly, totally plastic-free, and such type of various culture are there, which we have to copy down and adopt. Here you can see the bundles of leaves. The leaves are of Shimanianthus spurgatus, a plant from Marandaceae, and it is widely used in different regions for packing as well as serving food material, and is of course a nature's disposable plate. So such type of informations are very, very important. And this graph shows the utilization pattern of wild plants by the tribals of India. This is based on the project report in 1993. It was the first elaborated project on ethnomedicine, ethnopharmacology, and ethnobotany, as well as it is AICRT, All India Coordinated Research Program on Ethnobotany. So based on that study, a wide range of plant materials are used for various purposes, such for medicinal use, edible use, powder, gum, etc. Coming to the significance of ethnobotanical knowledge with respect to wild plants, phytomedicines have a very comes under the first and most prime role. Around 7,500 plants are used for medicines by various groups of people, and out of the information on 7,500, around 950 are found to be worthy and recommended for scientific scrutiny. So the chemical and biological investigation of about 300 tribal medicinal plants have been already carried out, and worldwide they are popular, such as Catharanthus rosseus, Papaver somnifera, Salix alba, Trichopus seylanicus, etc. See, this is the plant which is known to everybody, the Madagascar periwinkle or Catharanthus rosseus. Actually, it was initially used by the tribal people or natives of Madagascar region to reduce their blood sugar. Initially, it was used for that, and later on, the studies revealed that it contains an array of alkaloids, especially the vincristine and vinblastin, and further studies revealed that it is a wonderful medicine against leukemia. Same is the case of this Strychnos naxomica or carnirum. Detailed scientific investigations based on traditional knowledge may lead to discovery of potential biocompounds or phytomedicines. This is another example. This is an alkaloid strychnine is isolating from this particular plant, and in 1818, two French scientists initially isolated strychnine from this particular plant, and this is their observation was that the aborigines or the tribals used to hunt mammals using the arrow poisoned with the extract of this particular seed, and the animals will faint and fell down, and the detailed studies revealed that the alkaloid in this particular plant is neutralizing or paralyzing the neurons of the mammals, and that is why it is happening so. So this led to the discovery of the alkaloid strychnine, and later on it was used in various pharmacological aspects, especially with related to neurological problems. That's another example of tribal information, which was very much got appreciated to our institute, J.N.T. Bijare, the discovery of Trichoepis ceylanicus subspecies Travancoricus. It's known as Arogyapacha, just because this tender plant can be used as a tonic or an energy booster. This information was based on the Kani tribes who used to chew the fruits of this particular plant when they are wandering in the forests in search of non-timber forest produce or for their livelihood. After chewing these fruits, they will not get tired, and it is providing certain energy to them. This information was the discovery behind this, and as in the case of every tribal medicine, a series of researches are required to finalize the data regarding whether it is medicinal or not. So an interdisciplinary approach is very essential to analyze a particular species. So here you can see from 1988 onwards, the first information was in 1988 and 1989, and then series of studies regarding the nomenclature itself was sorted out based on this study. And then the ethnopharmacology, pharmacology, tissue culture for multiplication of this rare plant, pharmacology studies, a series of pharmacology studies, chemical studies, pharmacognosy, and a wide range of studies were carried out on this particular single plant. So the point is, a talented interdisciplinary approach only will ascertain the medicinal property of from a tribal knowledge. Another important significance of ethnobotanical knowledge is their information on wild edible plants. From India, around 3,900 species of plants are found used as edible, and out of which 800 are novel information, and at least 250 of them are worthy to be considered as alternative source for food supplements. This is an example, the Amaranthus caudatus of Amaranthus. You know, the seeds of Amaranthus are very small and minute, and generally the Amaranthus plants are used, the leaves of these plants are used as a vegetable. But in this particular case, the seeds are the important thing, which is a source of very good quality protein. Around 13% protein is there in the seeds. That means 1 cup of seeds will give 26 gram protein. So that much protein from a plant source is very, very important. And it is therefore the plant is known as a third millennium grain or a super grain or Rajgira. Rajgira means the king seed, or Ramdana means the gift of God. So elaborate studies were carried out in this particular plant, and various food products were also evolved from this since because it is a very good source of natural vegetative vegetable protein. And these are some pictures of traditional rice varieties cultivated by Kurchia tribe in Wayanad. Actually, we must respect them or go before them because such people are maintaining these wild genetic resources, precious wild genetic resources of the rice. Wayanad itself has around 28 rice varieties like this Tannuram 20, Velian, Gandhavishala, Mulanchana, Chennal, etc. So some tribes are still cultivating most of these varieties, and nowadays the government, agriculture department, and significantly the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, Calcutta, has done a significant contribution to protect these wild resources of genetic diversity of rice, and by providing enormous support to these tribal people to retain them in life form. This plant, everybody knows this is arrowroot, and the source of kuva, the rhizome yield a starchy powder, and it is very costly and seems to be a potential food. But actually, it is a tropical American plant, and in Ayurvedic texts as well as in Hortus Malabaricus, several other plants are mentioned as kuva because this particular Maranda arundinacea has came to India 100 years within 100 years. But the Ayurvedic text as well as Hortus Malabaricus was written much before that, and in those texts, these type of wild curcuma species are mentioned as kuva. And at J&D Vijare, we have analyzed the presence of this starch, edible starch, in 10 different wild species of curcuma, and astonishingly, all these starch are very much similar or even better than the starch from the Maranda arundinacea. It's a lesser known food material used by the Nicobar tribes. This is Pandanus leureum, a huge pandanus. This is considered J&T and this is the fruit, and it's a delicacy to the Andamanese tribes. They are using it along with scraped coconut and sliced pieces of this fruit. But the pharmacology as well as the nutrition aspects of these are not yet studied due to the lack of sufficient material. But hope they will give some wonderful result. This is also another potential fruit, lesser known fruit from Andamans. This is the view of a market, vegetable market in Andaman. You can see the fruits here. The plant is this Beccaria ramiflora. Beccaria cutalensis we have. Beccaria ramiflora is there in the northeastern part of India as well as in Andamans. It's the fruits are much far better than the Mutipadam or the Beccaria cutalensis we have in Kerala. This is another tribal food. The fruits of Aranga Vaiti. You can see the bunches of fruits here. Aranga Vaiti or Katadanga is available in the high hilly regions of southern Western Ghats. This is from Moriyar of Pathanamthitta district. And the kernel of these fruits, they are harvested. After harvesting, they will put it in water, immersed in water for certain weeks to remove all deleterious contents, and then the remaining starch they will make dry and make it as a flour and used for food purpose. This is another point which I would like to mention regarding a source of natural fibers from many wild plants. Some of the examples are around 500 and 250 plants are said to be useful for cordage and fiber. Some examples are Borassus flabilifer used by Verlis in Gujarat, Phoenix silvestris used by Meena tribe in Rajasthan. Both belongs to the palm family, Ericaceae. And this example is from Edlingera elater. It's not from India, it is in Thailand. This Edlingera elater actually is grown as a torch ginger, ornamental plant torch ginger. The wild species of this particular plant, this is the plant, plant will yield a very fine fiber from which even textiles can be made. This is the demonstration which they are given from the fiber, the textiles which is made using the fiber from Edlingera. Another source of biodiversity potential source is fodder. India is a land with a large number of cattle. So nutritive fodder is a requirement which we need for to satisfy our need for milk and beef. Bridelia retusa is an example where the Kadodia tribe of Gujarat is popularly using it. And Erythrina indicates another example. This is the Erythrina used by various tribes, even as folk people in different parts of the country. So studies on such plants are quite meager, and all this throw some light towards the significance of ethnobotanical research. And pesticides are another categories. Over 300 species are used as pesticides or pesticides to kill the fish for hunting. And at least 175 are quite promising. This is Curcuma aromatica. The leaf juice of this particular plant is applied on foot as well as the body to remove leeches, to repel leeches while going into the forest by the tribes. So there are certain mosquito repellents from some plants, Labiatae, Lamiaceae, and from Scrophulariaceae, and also certain insecticides. They have their own way to repel mosquitoes, flies, etc. So studies on such aspects is also not that much popular in our country. This is another important branch regarding the natural dyes and perfumes. Nowadays, we are very much using synthetic dyes and chemicals, which are often deleterious and even carcinogenic. And in this background, the usage of natural dyes is very significant, even for food dyeing as well as textile dyeing. Several plant materials are used, and the Westerners, especially the European region, they are much fond of using natural dye even in food as well as dress. Around 100 plants are coming under this category, but the investigation is not that much therein with regard to these type of plants. So the scientific validation of traditional knowledge require a series of observations and procedures as shown here. The traditional knowledge has the first of all, the identification of the plant material is very important. Then the collection of plant and extraction with suitable solvents, and chromatographic fractionation of extracts, pure compound isolation, structural elucidation, bioactivity assays, identification of bioactive molecules, and development of novel drugs using isolated active molecules. So this type of process is very much relevant to validate, scientifically validate the data which is obtained from the tribal people, and only then we can release it as a product, or we can patent it based on the tribal information. And ethnobotany and plant conservation has also an important role, because the information from tribals are very relevant with respect to locating some rare or threatened plants in its habitat. Only they they can identify where a particular rare plant or tree, especially in the case of trees, they know where a plant is located, and they can give information on the threat status of a plant also. And by growing some important plants around the dwelling place, they are knowing or unknowingly they are conserving some important rare and threatened plants. And some plants are being protected on behalf of rituals, myths, or totems. Each tribe has their own rituals, as I told in the beginning, based on their culture. To some trees, they are even worshipping as representatives of God. So, such cases, tribal people are conserving these type of plants based on their rituals and myths. And the harvesting methods is also an important plan. Sometimes it is very deleterious or sometimes it is very helpful. Either the information on harvesting methods of certain plants are very important. I will show you some examples. Nowadays it's a very rare plant. This Helminthostracus ceylanicus, fern alley. The Malayalam name is Padudana Kali, just resembling a centipede. The rhizome of this plant is resembling a centipede. And there is a preparation for against a snake bite using this rhizome along with the orchid Calanthe massica rhizome. So harvesting is due to continuous harvesting. This particular plant diminished in natural habitat, and the tribes themselves informed that earlier. This particular information I collected from near Kolathupuzha of Kollam district, and the tribes themselves are revealing that earlier days, around 40 years ago, this particular plant was so common in that area. And some people are regularly coming over there and harvesting the rhizomes for the preparation of medicines, and they themselves admit that just because of harvesting, this plant has diminished very well. This is Palmodak, or the tuber of Hypomia paniculata. He is demonstrating the significance of this tuber. In Ayurveda, it is used widely, mainly for giving a medicated ghee to the lactating mothers to increase their breast milk. But this particular man is shared his knowledge that the same type of use is there if he has given this material to his gods, and they also produced enormous quantity of milk. So he was so happy about it, and such lesser known or lesser known knowledge is very valuable for further studies. I told earlier regarding the deleterious way of harvesting certain plants. This trunk, you can see, this is the plant Karthavundiricum or Canarium strictum, the black damer. And in the circle, you can see the oozing out of the gum from the tree. This is actually the canopy and the close-up of the leaves. And in this case, though the seed setting is very much there, seed germination is very, very poor in this case, and the number of trees in the forest is very less. And the problem is this particular black damer or Karthavundiricum is collected by some people and as minor forest products and selling through the cooperative societies for various medicinal purposes, especially for the preparation of ointments or varnish like that. But the strange thing is that for harvesting this particular plant, they will make some wounds on the trunk and put fire around the tree, and it will leave for overnight. The next day, due to this severe heat around the tree, the entire resin from the tree will ooze down and come towards the bottom and remain as a lump. So for an easier harvesting of this particular resin, It was a very bad practice of harvesting by putting fire around the tree. So the tribes themselves uh, felt that it's a very bad custom because that was the end of that particular tree. So they expressed their worry on such bad habits of uh, harvesting certain minor forest produce from them. And protection of traditional knowledge is a very, very important aspect. The UN Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, in 1992 signed a Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD. CBD is a very important term with respect to the students. So Convention of Biological Diversity says was the first major step towards measures for the use of protection of the traditional knowledge, especially with related to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in and around a particular region. As per the CBD, the Article 8J of CBD, respect, preserve, and maintain the knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities. That means that the tribal people who are giving such information, so we have to respect and preserve and maintain such knowledges. So the preserving the traditional knowledge or protecting the traditional knowledge is very, very significant, and it is enforced by this CBD Article 8J. Another point is promotion of the application of traditional knowledge with the approval and involvement of the holders of such knowledge. The holders are often neglected in everywhere, in every field it is like that, but the rule insists we have to get an approval from the custodians of this knowledge, that means the tribes. So nowadays, even before getting a patent based on a traditional knowledge or ethnobotanical knowledge, this is very compulsory to provide a certificate from the holder of this knowledge and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits of the information. So the informants are giving some valuable clues, as I told several examples earlier, and they should be benefited out of the financially or as well as otherwise the benefit which we are getting through using these valuable potential information. And biopiracy of traditional knowledge is also an alarming theme. All unauthorized access to biological resources and associated traditional knowledge and patenting without compensation and consent of the knowledge. This is the point which I mentioned just now. So before patenting, we have to get the consent as well as we have to pay the compensation to the concerned knowledge holder or the custodian. If it is not like that, it will be referred as biopiracy. Another important term related to this aspect is intellectual property rights. You may be aware of that. It's IPR. Intellectual property rights are the rights given to the persons over the creations of their minds. They usually give the creator an exclusive right over the use of his or her creation for a certain period of time. Creation in the sense any sort of artisan's work. For example, even tribes can make a check dam in the forest river. So the materials which they are using and the architecture pattern which they are using is significant. And initially I have shown a tree hut. So some are very skilled to prepare a tree hut. The material which they are using for thatching as well as for covering the hut, all such informations are very significant, and all this will come under the intellectual property rights if it is by the idea of a particular creator. So geographical indication is also somehow related to this, and this is not that much related to tribal knowledge, but even traditional knowledge. TK, it is coming under TK. It's a community level intellectual property right. Geographical indication of the Indian Parliament passed the rule on geographical indications of goods in 1999. So these are some examples on the left side. You can see various food materials or spices or water, maybe the pepper, rice, different type of rice, even fruits such as pineapple, banana, and spice like cardamom, pepper, and jaggery. All are related to certain regions, particular regions, and they have got the geographical indication status. And the other side, you can see various craft works and skilled work like even clothing, ornaments, furnitures, etc. So all such traditional knowledge are valuable, and they will get a geographical indication so that for trading and business, such things will help the knowledge holder. Coming to the conclusions, ethnobotanical knowledge is a treasure of eco-friendly and cost-effective techniques. Tapping of ethnobotanical knowledge must be for the benefit of the society. The indigenous knowledge is eroding, and therefore it is very much required to for systematic documentation of this knowledge. And as I shown earlier, the scientific validation through proper interdisciplinary approach is very, very significant. And the ethnobotanical knowledge can be effectively used for various sort of environmental management, especially related to various departments of forestry, tourism, health, even education and all. And selected traditional knowledge may be refined using modern tools or techniques. So refinement is very significant, very, very relevant. And traditional knowledge is an important outcome of the environment which deserves care, conservation, and protection. And we have to consider the environment also, in which way the knowledge from these tribes or who are protecting the nature, we should use this knowledge in turn towards the benefit of the nature. Extraction of tribal knowledge should not be an exploitation, but for the exchange of benefits. Never it should be an exploitation. We should be very careful about that. And that's all. Thank you. So thank you all for the patient listening. And if any doubts or clarifications.
Thank you, sir, for the informative session. The floor is now open for discussion. You may ask your questions. You can post them in the chat box. You can ask your questions and clarifications. Sir, I have a question. My name is Elizabeth George. I'm from the Department of Botany, Mahatma College. Sir, what are the various career aspects for botany graduate students in ethnobotany and ethnobotanical sciences?
Ethnobotany alone may not assure any career chances, but all ethnobotanical knowledge is pertained to various other disciplines. It's a multidisciplinary approach only can give proper directions or future assurement regarding the career. So the data generated through ethnobotanical studies can be used for academic purpose, but the validation as well as product making or such things, they themselves cannot do, because it's of course a multidisciplinary approach and some sort of chemical characterization or pharmacological characterization, or even by engineering. For example, the Trivandrum Engineering College students are regularly coming over to our institute to study the potential of bamboos for construction. So it's actually based on ethnobotanical information. Certain bamboos are very much used for construction. So they are now analyzing the strength of those bamboos. So of course it's a multidisciplinary approach. It itself cannot stand.
Okay, thank you, sir. So one question has come from Pratibha Madam. More on techniques used for data collection and its validation. More on techniques.
Yes. Uh, it's a very important point. Just because of short of time, I omitted that. Data collection is also very significant. Generally, many tribals are collecting to share their information to a stranger. That's very important factor. So those who are involving in data collection should be initially get acquainted with the situations in that particular tribal region, or he or she should be a regular visitor, and gradually uh, they may feel that he is not dangerous or hostile, and it's a interaction of thoughts, and in turn by language is also very important, and only through proper communication between the tribes as is very important. So a help from a local people can also be used. Another important factor is collecting the data and documenting data with a proper questionnaire. We should be very thorough about the questions which we are going to ask to them, and the terminology as well as the description which they may give may not be familiar to us. For example, for a cancer or a tumor, they may be telling some other thing like lumps uh, or growths, painful bulging, like that. So assuming such things, even symptoms of a disease, we should be very careful on that. And for that, initially we have to prepare a data sheet in which we can document it properly. And it's also better to take a recorder. Earlier we were used to take a tape recorder and recording all the dialogue between the researcher as well as the tribe. So it's a very slow and gradual process to get genuine information from these tribal people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more question. What are the problems which is commonly occurring when we go for ethnobotanical studies?
Yeah, as I indicated, generally they will not welcome us properly. Sometimes even they will be reluctant, totally reluctant, and they may not be happy to accommodate us in their community. Actually, each and every ethnobotanical uh, survey require 4 to 5 days or even weeks. We have to stay with them and we have to move around with them, uh, sharing with their food and other aspects. So, in such a situation, uh, the researcher should be with such a mind to become one among them. That's really a challenge. And another important point is getting the support from the forest department. So only with proper documents and with proper permission from the forest department, it should be initiated.
Thank you, sir. Participants can ask their questions and doubts. So I hope